Hey there, everyone. Dave Keller here at StockCharts.com, and welcome to this special edition of The Final Bar. We're actually traveling this week, going down to Texas to College Station to visit the students at Texas A&M, support the CMT Association doing a special event later this week, and spreading the gospel of technical analysis to anyone who will listen. While we're gone, we did want to share with you a special edition of The Final Bar, really focusing on some of the tools that we bring to bear on the markets every trading day. These are the tools that I use every day as I'm using StockCharts, that some of our fellow contributors like Grayson Rose and Julius DeKempener and Tom Boley and many others use as they are trying to understand the markets. I've heard from many people when they dig into the StockCharts platform, it is a rich, deep, and powerful system. And they often say something along the lines of, I didn't know it could do X, and they fill in that end of that sentence. Today and tomorrow, these 2 days, we're going to do a special series here called the Top 10 Hidden Features of StockCharts, and I'm sort of going to give you the end of that sentence 10 times, 10 different ways. We're going to talk about some of those features that you may be familiar with, and maybe you're not really understanding the ways that you can use them to better understand market dynamics and price behavior, or maybe some things you've never seen before on the StockCharts platform. But I hope this not just helps you understand how to use StockCharts a little better, but really helps illuminate the markets by thinking about how you can apply these tools every trading day as you are trying to understand these markets in very uncertain times here in late 2023. So let's get started. In this episode, we're going to show the first 5 hidden features of StockCharts. In our next episode, we will finish that off with numbers 6 through 10. Let's get to the first one. The first one that I will start with is perfectly horizontal and vertical lines. Now, you may say, that doesn't seem like a very big deal. I guarantee it actually is. And let me show you an example of why that's so meaningful. We're going to look at a chart of Tesla here. And when you're analyzing a chart, one of the reasons why this show is actually called The Final Bar is because when I'm teaching people technical analysis for the first time, I always tell them start with the final bar and then look to the left, right? Start with the current price action and then look to the left. And the further left that you get, the less and less relevant those levels are. But it's all about understanding where we're at relative to where we've been. So focusing on key peaks and valleys in the price, where buyers and sellers have reversed, where buying power has exhausted, where selling pressure has been alleviated. You know, those key levels, many would say the market has a memory, right? It sort of remembers key price points because investors remember where they bought and sold. And when the market turns, that has meaning for a lot of investors. So one of the tools that I use all the time, and if you follow the show and you've watched it, I'm often looking at a chart, clicking on annotate, and then applying trend lines. And the trend line analysis is very simple, right? It's sort of taking 2 key levels, a high and a low, kind of connecting them and, thinking about the trend, keep thinking about the pace of this move, and then starting to recognize when that trend is shifted. And I would argue, sort of on the S&P 500 off of the major lows, we have one of those classic trend lines, right? October of 2022 lines up with March of 2023. And I would argue breaking down through that trend line September of 2023, pretty important. Now, if you look at what's happened since then, we've sort of bounced back above trendline resistance. We failed here in October. Once again, we're testing that trend line from below. So, it's all about breaking and then following through when you have a change of trend. But you also note a lot of times I have these seemingly perfectly horizontal lines, which sort of refer to a particular level. Now, what I've seen people do on the StockCharts platform is sort of painstakingly click and then try to get it just about right and kind of drag it up and down and kind of make sure it looks okay. But you're often not that good at drawing in a horizontal line as you probably think. Here's the trick. If you click on the first point and you have this line that's kind of very fluid and dynamic, hit the Command key on your Apple keyboard and it actually goes perfectly horizontal. There is a comparable keystroke. I think it's the Alt key on a PC if that's what you use, and I'll show you how you can actually find that out if you're not familiar. But that actually allows you to draw a perfectly horizontal line. Now, the reason why I think that's helpful is because what I did here was I said, okay, the May low from last year was pretty important. The sell-off in Tesla, and that's what we're looking at here, stock sold off in the first half of 2022. It rallied in the third quarter before selling off in the fourth quarter and really making a new low into the beginning of 2023. So that May low was pretty significant. That was a 12-month low. It took quite a while before we found support again and then finally broke down through it. When I draw that horizontal line, I can then see where it lines up with other levels. So I can see that actually lines up with the February and late March peak from 2023. It's just below the August low, and it's kind of right where we're at right about now. It's just above $200 a share. So by drawing a horizontal line, I can find an important turning point, an important level where I think is pretty meaningful. Then I can draw that perfectly horizontal line. And then when I save it, I always will be able to refer back to that. So what I've done here is basically said the August and September of 2022 highs were pretty meaningful. The May, June lows of that year were pretty meaningful. And now I can see where we're at relative to those significant turning points going back. And again, this is all within the goal of trying to see where we're at relative to where we've been and recognizing that we're back in that range where we spent a lot of the second half of 2022. Now, the other thing you can do is draw a perfectly vertical line. The reason why you might want to do this is if it is a significant moment. A lot of times where I find people want to draw this would be an entry or exit point, right? This is where you bought the stocks. You want to put a vertical line just to remember this is where I bought it. Maybe you put a note to describe what you did. Another example would be an earnings release or some significant news event, and you just want to visually identify on the chart, here's where something important happened, so you can think about what the world was like before that moment and then after that moment, because something might have changed. So what you can do there is just like we were drawing a horizontal line by hitting the Command key. You can do the same thing and just go up to a vertical, close to the point, and we'll draw a vertical line for you. And that's a really good way to sort of save a particular moment. The other thing I would do, of course, is put a comment, right? So put a note and say, this was important, and type the exact note on what it is. And then what's helpful is then you save that chart to a chart list. You can remember the important levels. You can remember why they're important by putting a comment right by that line. You can also have vertical lines which signify a particular point in time. You can say this was earnings. I bought X shares at X price. Something so that you can remember why that point was important. And I would argue technical analysis and using charts is basically you have your report card right in front of you. Save where you made decisions, save important levels that are meaning to you because of an entry and exit point. You can always go back to that chart, and as the market continues, as prices continue to update going forward, you can always go back and remember that and why it was important. One of the chart lists, by the way, that I keep handy, and I don't make a ton of trades in my personal accounts. I try to keep my turnover fairly low. But one of my favorite lists that I will not show you, to avoid any ridicule from decisions that I made in the past. But one of the great ideas that I came up with years ago, I think this might have been an Arthur Hill trick that he shared with me. A lot of my early chart list experimentation was talking with Arthur Hill, Grayson Rose, Tom Bowley, some of those power users of StockCharts, just to see how they were using the platform. And one of the things they encouraged me to do, I think it was Art that suggested this, was create a chart list called brokerage closed positions, or closed positions for whatever account or import. So this is a brokerage account that I was actively managing for a while. And what I would do is anytime I would close a position, I would move the chart from the brokerage chart list to the brokerage closed positions chart list. And then once a quarter, I would go through those charts and I would have vertical and horizontal lines showing me here's when I sold it, here's the price level where I sold it. And then I would just look at what happened afterward. And I would think about, did I buy too early? Did I really sell too early, sell too late, right? Did I miss the boat? Was I stopped out, and why? And what might I improve, right? What could I do a little bit differently? But only by capturing those moments as you're going can you have a really healthy review process down the road. So my first suggestion to you, and the first item, first of the hidden features of StockCharts, is the ability to draw horizontal and vertical lines. Again, you hold the Command key down to do it. And by the way, if you want some of additional hidden features that I'm not going to share because they didn't make the top 10, if you click the annotate button, you'll notice at the bottom there's probably something you've never clicked on, this little question mark. And our developers years ago actually put this little handy thing together. Now, this is custom for a Mac keyboard because that's what I'm using. If you have a PC keyboard, these will look a little bit different because it'll be more specific to the platform you're using. But this will tell you all of those things that tell you how you can create horizontal and vertical lines, how you can drag and make trend channels by duplicating things, and all sorts of different features you may not be familiar with. So, for example, here this trend line, command and drag a handle to snap an angle in 90-degree increments. That's what increments. That's what we showed you. You can see there's a bunch of other features and tools just to make trend line analysis and really a visual analysis of the price a little more robust, a little more powerful in your own process. So that's the first of the 10 hidden features. Let's get to the second one. Let's say trend lines are great, but what if you think about more support and resistance ranges? And if you've watched the final bar for a while and you've watched some of the charts that I share, you'll find it's not only not often just a vertical line or horizontal line that I will share to talk about a particular level. I'll often have a little range. And the chart of the S&P that I share pretty much on every show is a great example of that. This is basically showing you the S&P 500, and I've highlighted some of the support levels that I think could be meaningful if we deteriorate further, right? So the first level below current prices is around 43 to 43.30. And then below that, it's kind of 41.80 to 42.30. Below there, it's around 40.50 to 40.80. So instead of a specific level, I have more ranges. And this is something that I think really respects how the markets actually play out in 2023. If you go back to some of the great technical analysis literature, books by John Murphy, Martin Pring, Edwards and McGee, and others, you will find that they talk about precise levels, right? The price will hit this exact level and they go up. But you have to remember, a lot of those books were written when stocks traded on eighths. So the likelihood of you hitting a precise point was very high. Now that we're trading at sub pennies, right, between trades, and I would argue that that idea of precision is probably a myth. It's a mirage here in 2023. So by thinking of it more as support and resistance ranges, I think it's more accurate. So the way that you create these is actually using the rectangle drawing tool. So if you click on annotate, go to a rectangle. Let's say this particular range is one that I want to highlight, maybe this 4,100 to 4,120 range because of this recent low. Kind of drag and make the box. A lot of times it will look kind of like this because it'll start with a heavy color. What you want to do is click on the little color bar and then just make it a little less opaque, a little more transparent, get it to the right shade that you want, and then you're done. And that's how I created this blue shaded area. What's helpful about this, again, is I've found that visually it's much more meaningful. Instead of having a ton of lines that mean a ton of different things, having a range can be a little more visually impactful. It's a little easier to recognize. And also it respects, again, the fact that there's some fluidity. I would say if you think there's a precision to price levels, I think that's sort of a bygone era we're not in anymore. I think now, with all the ways that market structure has evolved, you need to think of support and resistance levels not as levels, but as ranges with some wriggle room. So you can either draw a line and just realize that it's going to go over and under that line very often, or draw a rectangle, and that's kind of what I would do. So draw a rectangle, basically drag the slider to the left to make it a little more transparent, get it to the shade that you want, and you'll find once you start to use StockCharts to create these, I kind of have the subtle red, the subtle green, the subtle blue, subtle purple, and I'll actually start to save some of those custom colors at the bottom of the palette here. So it's very easy. Once you've started to do it, it's actually very easy to continue to use this more often than not. And at this point, I'm just kind of jumping around between some of these predetermined colors that I found important. And that's how I get some of these support and resistance ranges that you'll see on a lot of the charts that I share on the final bar. So hidden feature number 2 would be shaded support and resistance levels. And again, use the rectangle shape tool to do that. And again, I've just shown you 2 of these first 2 hidden features. We can't get to all of them, but make a note of some of these other ones, right? And things like the percent change tool, some of the Fibonacci tools can be really helpful just to help you understand the structure behind price action as you're analyzing it. The third item, the third hidden feature of StockCharts that I want to share with you today is what we call auto support and resistance levels. And for this one, I'm going to go to a different stock, DraftKings. This is a name that I've been following here recently, really was consolidating. I mean, if you look at the rally from the beginning of 2023, really through the beginning of August, incredible run higher. And DraftKings is one of those that, as the market sort of stalled out here in July and August, DraftKings also has sort of stabilized, but it really didn't break down, right? A lot of names have actually retraced and broken down through key support levels in August, September. The S&P itself, right, has made lower highs and lower lows. The NASDAQ has made a pattern of lower highs and lower lows. DraftKings is a little different. You had that initial gap lower and the push to around, we'll call it $25, $26, and then from there it's actually stabilized. You'll find we've actually held that level. So DraftKings at 26, pretty meaningful. So I may want to draw a range or some sort of level to identify. You can see on the upper end, we can also look at that high around 34. So one of the other tools you can use is what's called an auto support and resistance level. And I came up with this one as I've talked with Grayson Rose. This is one of the things that he uses often. And again, it's in the annotations bucket. It's this line right here, which you may not have seen, called auto support and resistance. And what's great about this is you just left click and drag and it will set an automatic trend line. So let's say I bought DraftKings right around here, right at $26 a share. I saw the retest of the low. and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Let's say I bought right at this moment. I did not, but let's assume hypothetically that you did. Great trade so far. It's now gapped higher and pushing to the upside. So you're feeling really good. But you also want to make sure that you manage your risk. And I always tell people, when you enter a trade, that is the time to develop your exit strategy. Too often, I will find people, they buy a stock or get a particular signal, it's going higher, but then they forget to set a stop. They forget to have a good exit strategy. All of a sudden, the trade starts to move against them, and then they don't have a good exit strategy. What happens then is you are emotionally reacting to what's happening. You make an emotional decision as opposed to an evidence-based system. So one of the ways you can do that is when you buy the stock, when you take the trade, you set your stop immediately. And I think this auto support resistance line is a great way to visually represent stops in particular. And here's why. Once I create that, and let's say, bought DraftKings or whatever, and again, I did not, and it's not a recommendation, but let's say I did, and here's where I bought it. What happens is this creates a horizontal line. The line will be green if the price is above it. It will be red if the price is below it. So if I have a chart list with a series of charts, all with long positions that I own, all I need to do with some regularity, let's say every day or every Friday or however often you're managing your positions, you flip through the charts and you're basically just looking visually to see, are we above the green line? And if we are, we're fine. We're still above our stop. Do I need to adjust my stop? No problem. I can edit the chart and just kind of move it up a little bit to the new stop point. But the moment one of these lines turns red, that means the price has now broken down through my stop. And so visually, it almost jumps off the screen. I think it just gives you one less barrier to making the right decision when the chart does tell you to exit the position. The line going from green to red, it's a simple visual trick, but it is powerful as you're going through charts. Any of the stocks where the price is now below your support level, below your stop, you need to take action immediately. So by looking at this, a series of charts with this particular annotation, and again, I would suggest you think of it with open positions, long positions, and you just want to make sure that you have a stop that is not being triggered yet. Use this auto support resistance level and just make sure you're above the green line. And again, as you flip through a bunch of charts, the ones that are red will jump off the screen. You will immediately know, okay, that's a stock I need to look at a little bit further. More current example to think about, something like Disney, right? And this is one where I think it's a perfect example of that. Let's say Disney, which is reporting earnings actually today as we're recording this, let's assume that you bought here or that you're buying now, and you just want to make sure, okay, I'm buying at today's low. Let's make sure that we remain above that level. So you set that point right here. I'm just saving it as a sample chart. You just want to make sure overall the price or the trend line remains green. As long as it is, we're above there. The moment it switches to below the level, then you know that your stop is triggered. Again, I probably do a little shorter term time frame just so I can make sure I see it. Here you can see what I'm talking about. Below that level, it turns red. That would tell you your stop is triggered. And again, this is not necessarily the ideal place to put a stop, but let's say this was your entry point. You just want to make sure, am I above or below my entry point? Maybe this is a stop, and you want to make sure as long as the green line is green, I'm still above my stop, and that's fine. And as the price would go up, ideally you can bump your stop higher and higher and higher. The other thing you could do is make it an aspirational line, right? Let's say I'm buying here, but, whoops, wrong one, auto support resistance. Say I'm long here, but I will exit when we hit that August peak because I don't think for whatever reason that we're going to get much further than that. There's another one, and I can flip through my charts and see, okay, any of these where the line is red, we've not reached my upside objective yet. Once it turns green, that means objective reached, I can take action. So, I often get asked about how people, how to actually manage orders, right? And how to think about, all right, when the chart says something, how do I know? How do you actually take action? There's a lot that has been done in terms of automation, right? A lot of systems that allow you to automatically put orders in. I've never been super comfortable with that level of automation. I love a system like StockCharts watching the charts for me. I love using the scanning engine, things like these auto support and resistance levels to have the system tell me when to take action. But I like being in control. I like managing the money manually, and I like seeing this evidence and then taking the action of going and placing the trade. So if you're in that bucket where you're actively managing, but you don't like outsourcing all of those things to a computer and you're just not sure when something's placing orders for you, you just want to make sure you're the one hitting the trade button. This might be a great sort of middle ground. This is how I like to use a platform like StockCharts, just to visually encourage me to make the right decision with my portfolio. So the third hidden feature would be the auto support and resistance levels. And again, I think you could use these for stops, for price targets, just for other levels that you want to pay attention to and just have some sort of action, some call to action when the line changes from green to red or vice versa. The fourth of the hidden features of stock charts I want to share with you today, the gallery view, and particularly looking at comparing multiple stocks with one set of charts. Let's say I am trying to debate right now whether to buy one of two stocks or one of two ETFs. And this is a common thing that may come up in your analysis, right? It's less about do I want to buy Disney, but it's more about do I want to buy Disney or Tesla or Home Depot or Alcoa or any one of the other thousands of stocks that you can. Once you boil it down to a couple ideas, often it's sort of an A versus B, right? An apples to apples comparison. Do I want to own stock A or do I want to own stock B, or why? Do I want to own both of them? But being able to compare them together is helpful. So you can either run a bunch of different individual charts and just sort of make your analysis along the way, or you can use what's called the gallery view. And I would encourage you to click on Sharp Chart at the top, switch it to gallery view. Now, if I type one stock like Tesla, it's going to go into our gallery view function, and it has 4 charts always included: an intraday view, a daily view, a weekly view, and a point and figure view. And these are preset by our developers, but you may notice if you run this on your login that mine looks a little bit different, and that is the hidden feature. You can actually customize these charts to really be more truer to your own analysis. So it's going to start with some default intraday, daily, and weekly and point and figure charts, but I've actually created my own chart styles that really reflect how I'm trying to understand these different timeframes. And I'll show you in a minute how you can customize them. But first off, if I start off with just one name, I have these 4 charts, and this is really more of a multiple time frame analysis to help me understand how the stock has been traded from short-term to long-term and everything in between. What I can also do is enter the first ticker, a comma, the second ticker, and I'm doing 2 random names, right? Tesla and NVIDIA. Now I just compare them one versus the other, and this is that apples to apples analysis I was talking about. Now I can start to draw some really cool conclusions, not just about where is Tesla relative to its 200-day moving average, but which of these names is above its 200-day moving average? Which one have I seen gaps lower below support? Which ones have actually held support? Which ones are oversold and which ones are not yet to the oversold regions? Which ones are underperforming over the last 4 weeks and which ones are outperforming over the last 4 weeks? On the longer term time frame, which one has recently made a new all-time high and which one is still very underneath its all-time highs from 2 years ago? What I've done here is basically taken 2 different stocks, and again, you can do this with similar names, Coke, Pepsi type of analysis, or 2 very different ideas, and just look at some of the ideas that you're looking to put to work, and just compare the 2 of them, and compare and contrast, and just think, all right, if I had to pick one, which one would I pick? And that's probably where you want to focus your attention and focus your assets as well. So how do I customize these charts as I was showing you? And again, I love the multiple time frame analysis. I love the comparative analysis. This does a number of different things, but how do I customize the charts? So at the very top, there's this little button in gray, a little message in gray, Stock Charts members, which of course you all should be. Customize your gallery view charts, and it'll give you instructions if you type there. What you basically need to do is create chart styles with these particular names. And what the Stock Charts system is going to do is look in your login for a chart style called Gallery Daily, and whatever you save as that chart style, that's what's going to appear right here, right? So this is the way you can customize these different charts so you really can apply your own indicators, your own analysis, your own combination of inputs, but allow you to look at multiple timeframes and multiple stocks in a way that is most meaningful to you. This is a level of customization that I find not enough members actually get to. I would encourage you to take the time to set some of these up. There's an upfront investment of your time, but once you've had it set up, it's really powerful in terms of the analysis that you're able and the conclusions you're able to draw going forward. So the 4th hidden feature is the comparative gallery view using your own custom chart styles. Now, I should point out at this moment, if you have issues with any of these things, applying any of these, you have 2 things you can do that I would encourage you. Number 1, click on the magnifying glass, type in a keyword, so type gallery view, and you'll see all the instructions that you might need to know about how to do this. Auto support resistance. You'll have articles from our chart school that explain how to do it. And if that doesn't answer your questions, we have this little help button. Click on that, type a message to our support desk. They will follow up with you very shortly with some additional resources to help you make sense of these hidden features. That gets us to our last one in this first of a 2-part series on top 10 hidden features. And number 5 is the CandleGlance feature. The CandleGlance feature is what you will see that I use all the time on the final bar. You may not even know that that's what it was, but when I bring up intermarket analysis, right, where I'm looking at something outside the equity space like Bitcoin or interest rates or the dollar or crude oil prices or gold, I always come to this page, and this is a Chrome bookmark that I set for this gallery, what's called the CandleGlance view of these different charts. When you bring up a chart list, and I should tell you that the next 5, a lot of them really dig into the chart list functionality. So if this is of interest, you're really going to like the second half of this series, because we're really going to dig into how to manage a list of charts with some really powerful capabilities. If you are looking at sort of your list of charts, you're probably looking at this as a list you've probably seen, or a screen you've probably seen. This is where you have your list of charts, and you can click on them to look at individual names. But if you go to where it says View List as Summary and switch it to CandleGlance, this really speaks to a technique we would use when I worked for a large buy-side institution. We used this technique all the time, but we did it with printed papers. We printed out a lot of charts every day. We all had printers in our office. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit we would print out hundreds of charts because it was a very paper-centric sort of analysis. And we would take a ton of charts and we would put them on a conference room table and we would start stacking them. What are the great charts? What are the really bad charts? And what are the okay charts? And then you take the great charts and you'd separate them from really great to kind of great. And you take the okay and you go from kind of better than okay and kind of worse than okay. And you start to differentiate. And that's how you'd think about a portfolio or a group of ETFs or whatever, by sort of putting them in those buckets. What this CandleGlance feature basically gives you a paper-free and a very powerful visual way of looking at a pile of things. Think of this as throwing a bunch of charts on your conference room table and then starting to look and see what sort of movements jump out at you. When I'm looking at a group of things and I just want to say, all right, what's above the 200-day, what's below the 200-day? Which ones are in clear uptrends? Which are in clear downtrends? Which ones have had significant reversals recently? For example, some of the commodity ETFs gapping lower today. And this was the first place this morning as I was looking at this bundle of charts. I immediately was drawn to, oh, okay, we have a gap down in the DBC. That's a broad commodity ETF, and led me to think a little bit more of, why are commodities selling off? What's happening to crude oil prices and gold and other commodities that I may be focused on? But this CandleGlance is a quick visual way to immediately get it drawn into the big things that are moving that you want to pay attention to. Now, your CandleGlance functions may look a little bit different. And so part of this hidden feature, the CandleGlance function, is to look up at the upper left where it says chart duration. Now, you probably look something a little more like this, or maybe like this one. I think this is the default that we use for a lot of our new users, which is basically a 2-month view. It's basically just showing you a quick candle chart with some moving averages, and this is a default view that we all have. But what I've done is I've actually created a custom style, because I wanted to look at a 1-year chart with the 50-day and 200-day moving averages, and that was how I wanted to, sort of have my default first look at any set of charts that I'm interested in. Just like we saw for that gallery view function, you have a similar message, this little message at the gray, and what you need to do is basically create a chart style called CandleGlance. And whatever chart style you create, it's going to shrink that down into a little thumbnail view, and that's what is going to appear when you bring up your custom style. Now, if you use the default styles, you can quickly add different indicators. You can add something like RSI, and you can set the different time periods. So it actually gives you some pretty robust, very simple visual tools. So depending on how complicated, how difficult you want to be, or how busy you want these charts to become, you can create customizations up here on the top and add different indicators. But I've found just creating a quick custom style is the easiest way to do that. And for me, when I'm looking at a group of ETFs, a group of stocks, a group of industries, a group of ETFs, whatever it is, starting with this CandleGlance function, using a custom style is a great starting point. It's not going to answer the question necessarily, but it's going to help you figure out what questions you want to start asking to dig into these items in a little more detail. So that, my friends, those are the first 5 of the top 10 hidden features of StockCharts. So far, we've talked about annotating your charts, using some of the custom annotation tools, auto support and resistance, horizontal, vertical lines, and ranges to really focus on price behavior, and then getting into some of the additional views that you can use, like GalleryView, to compare and contrast stocks, the CandleGlance view to really understand a group of things, a group of stocks or ETFs based on their visual characteristics. Don't forget to check out our second of this in this series where we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the chart list feature. We're going to talk about how you take a list of stocks or ETFs and then do some additional, more complicated, more powerful analytical tools to really understand and focus on the best opportunities within any group. I'm Dave Keller with StockCharts.com. Thanks for joining me for this special episode of The Final Bar. We'll be back live as soon as we can. But until then, be well, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.